So today I wanted to share with you this very different placket that you can use on the back of a bishop dress. It's different than your traditional placket, which is hidden. This is an exposed placket, and I kind of like it because it adds a little visual interest, and you can use contrast fabrics for this as well as for the bias band and sleeve trims if you like. I did experiment with this a little bit, and I did try using a larger placket as well. And while it's cute, I think it's a little bit too large for, at least for my taste. That it might be what you like, so you can experiment with different sizes, but I'm going to show you how to do this narrower little placket. So for the demonstration, I am just using a practice piece. And before you make this type of placket, I would highly recommend that you practice it first. The tools that I'm going to be using to work on this bishop dress is going to be a ruler with the 1/8 inch grids. It's an 18 by 2 inch ruler with the 1/8 inch grids all the way down it. Blue washout marker, and I like to use the Clover fine tip. Sure it says that on here. Yes, the water erasable Clover fine tip marker. Then I like my Ginger embroidery scissors, and of course glass head pins. So here is my back of what would be a bishop dress, and I've done my little tiny French seam in the back. This pattern, I'm using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so I end up with a little tiny 1/8 inch seam on the back. And to make this placket work, after you've sewn up to the dot, this is going to be your opening. After you have sewn up to your dot here with your French seam, then you need to use your gridded ruler, and you want to, on each side, you want to align this and use your blue washout marker and mark at 3/8 of an inch, which is your seam allowance, and then mark again at 5/8 of an inch. After you've done that, you want to pull your pleating threads out to the 5/8 inch mark. And once those are pulled out, then you can cut along this 3/8 inch mark. You want to trim that seam allowance off. Then you're going to have your two placket pieces. These are 2 inches wide by, I make it a little bit longer than the length of this opening to give you a little wiggle room there. So 2 inches wide. You want to interface this with either baby interfacing or German interfacing. A very lightweight interfacing. I don't care for the Pellon interfacings. I don't think that they are the same quality as your German interfacing or baby interfacing. So you want to do that, and then you want to press under a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now if you have trouble getting an exact 1/4 inch, because you need to be real accurate with this process, if you have trouble with a 1/4 inch, you can always stitch your 1/4 inch seam allowance, create a stitching line exactly a 1/4 of an inch away, and then you would press so that this stitched edge is right at the fold there. That's a great way to do it, and if you need the visual help of a contrast thread, I would recommend using a long basting stitch to stitch that 1/4 inch seam, because then you can easily pull it out afterwards. So you're going to first press your 1/4 of an inch in, and then you're going to press it so that the two folded edges are together here. Once you've done that, then it's time to stack these pieces. Now, as you can see, I like to have my buttonholes on the left and then the buttons on the right placket underneath. That's how I learned to do it in drafting school, and that's how I continue to do it. I know a lot of heirloom seamstresses prefer to have it the opposite way. So whichever way you prefer to do it, it will determine how you stack your two placket pieces. So for me to get the buttonholes on the left-hand side, I would want to stack this so that the open end faces to the left, and then underneath that I would want the open end facing to the right. You want to pin these two pieces together, and then you're going to flip it upside down here and align it with this blue dot, and you want to make sure that you are centered over the seam line here. So you're going to align it like this, you're going to pin this to the fabric, and then stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and make sure you back stitch at both ends. Okay, I have stitched the placket to the garment back with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and again, just so you can see, I lined up the edge of the placket with that blue dot that was on the fabric at the base of the stitching. So this stitching is actually a 1/4 inch below the blue dot here. The next thing you need to do with this is turn it over to the inside, and you're going to want to make a cut from the opening to the very edge of the stitching on each side, which will create a Y-shape cut on the back. So I've created the Y-shaped cut. Hopefully you can see that on the back of the garment here. And then the next step is to turn it back over to the right side, and you will see with both seam allowances trimmed at that 3/8 of an inch mark, these meet up together. Then you're going to press this placket up towards the top, and we'll start with the bottom one. The seam allowance is going to be tucked into the inside, and on this bottom placket you tuck the seam allowance to the inside. Keep your threads out of the way as much as possible, and then you can pin this. Whoops, I need one pin, so that you're pinning the two sides of the placket and the garment in between that. And the idea is that when you get up to your pleating threads here, that you're going to reach the edge of the last pleat. So it looks like I'm going to need to pull out one more pleat here before I get all the way to the top. So this is the underneath placket that I've got pinned down, and now I can work on the upper placket and do exactly the same thing. You're going to tuck in the seam allowance so that it is between, sandwiched in between here. And then pin this down to secure. Now, both sides are pinned and ready to sew. and it's looking good. You can see hopefully here that you've got a nice straight line next to your last pleat once we pull these threads up, and that's true on both sides here. So I'm going to go stitch these down and give it a good press, and then I'll be right back. Okay, my placket has been stitched down. At this point you can trim off the extra placket that extends past the top here, and do that on both sides. And you can see after stitching and pressing, you have a perfect little placket that gives some more interest to your garment. On the inside, I did zigzag through this, and let me flip this over and show you on. So you can see you've got the little V shape there and this little edge here, and I just did a zigzag stitch back and forth to finish that seam allowance, so that all seam allowances are finished. And what I do on my garments then is I will put a size tag to cover that zigzag. Let me see if I can show you that on one of these finished garments. So here is the inside of one of the other ones that's finished, and I just place that over the zigzagged edge and stitch that on. So if you have size tags, that's a nice place to put them, and it also hides that seam. So I hope you found this helpful. If so, please hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any upcoming videos.